So that's the tune we're going to be dissecting, and the whole tune started from so on Facebook there's this drumming and music page called Coffee Break or Coffee Music, and they had a drum break on there one day that was like somebody doing a really fast foot pedal with one foot. And I just thought it was a really dope sounding, something about the compression on the video, like, or if they were plugging mics in, I don't think they were, but it sounded really cool to me, and I put it in my drum break folder to pull from. And this is the dry break by itself that I ripped off of Facebook. I ripped directly into the program here. I'm using FL11, and this is what it sounds like. So the dude was using one foot pedal for that, which is kind of crazy. But I just put a little bit of a low shelf on it, or to cut some of the lows out. Anything under like 50 hertz. But that it wasn't even things you could hear. It was just to be extra, to just cover my bases mix down wise. Like anything under 50 to 100 hertz that isn't necessary, I just get it out of there completely. That's where the tune originated, was that break. Actually came together, it started into a song, like where I made a project file and shit when I saw this video right here, which is called Creepy Broken Tornado Siren in Chicago. That I ripped also, and just from one of the reasons I love FL is you can just manipulate samples like super easily via like automations or just the pitch right here, or just it's pretty easy to manipulate samples. And I made it into this loop where I grabbed this part, but it wasn't quite timed right if you listen with the metronome. So I had to kind of just chop it a little bit. Right back. Yeah, I pitched it a little bit, it looks like, or stretched it or something. Yeah, so that, okay, I stretched it out is what I did. The original sounds like this. And basically, I just manipulated the timing of it to make it do this. And I just looped that over and over again. Pretty sure the whole intro is just that looped. I did an octave down at the halfway point of the intro. So right here I did an octave. And then right before the drop, I used another part of the siren part. And right there at that last part, you can see where I chopped it right here. I put that on its own mixer and put a delay on it, and it sounds like a slow triplet, and I just kind of let it ring out over the drop, kind of smooth it. So it actually trails on for quite a while, but that's how the song like kind of came together, and I ended up going back and grabbing this drum loop to use. It ended up making most of the main drums. I eventually ended up shaping these individual drum samples from that one drum loop there that I got off Facebook. So I ended up making the kick soloed, the snare soloed. I can't believe I did this, but the snare is actually just the actual loop just cut. I just cut that snare out. That's it. It has like a 80s gate effect on it almost because I just chopped it. I guess it ended up just working out. I usually try to shape off my snares a little bit, kind of volume shape them so that they're a little smoother of a cut than just a harsh wall of chopping the dB there. But basically it ended up creating this kick snare pattern. That's just from chopping and volume automating this loop. I also use the hi-hat from the loop. That's just ripped right out of the loop and volume shaped a little bit. I always like to start with like a bass layer of drums, which means just like kick, snare, hi-hat, and just have like a bass layer, and then from there layer it up to add different textures and kind of just build it up from there. But the bass layer came from that kit, and it's pretty much the main layer of the whole song is just this. So, but from there, I kind of like, I see something right here. There's just some noise that I grabbed from the kick to kind of layer over this. So, actually with that layer, you'll hear on the second kick of each loop, it does like a, it's just noise. So just stuff like that is where I start really kind of layering it up. And there was also one open hi-hat I grabbed from the kit, from the original loop. So altogether, these are all the original kind of rippings from the loop, is this. And it looks like this open hi-hat is also just a pure cutout. I didn't even do anything to it, I just chopped this out. And you can actually hear some lows in it when it cuts at the end here, which I usually scoop out of there, but like I said, this is a pretty, I already did that initial scoop on the loop itself, and this, like I said, a pretty simple project, which is one of the reasons I picked it. And it does sound like I did a little bit of EQing on the kick. Let me see. Yeah, I boosted the lows a bit on the kick. I did that initial scoop, and I guess I put some back in right here, and then boosted the highs a little bit. Tiny little cut on the mids, but not, it's not really that drastic. So from there, there's really no telling when I started adding like other percussive layers. I made this song a long time ago, and I can't remember the exact order that I ended up doing things in, but I know it started with the siren into the drum break here that I made into a 140 loop. Probably started adding bass lines pretty quickly. Usually something will spark the song idea, like it'll be like a creepy tornado siren or atmosphere or something that I hear. And then from there, usually I'll kind of just get at least something of a drum loop going. It might not be the final loop even, but then pretty quickly after that, I'll usually start with bass lines. So it's kind of like something to spark the song idea and be like, okay, here's the theme of the song. Then just get a little loop going so that you don't have to sit here and listen to this metronome over and over again. And then from there, kind of is where the bass lines and like the guts of the song start really coming in. So that's typically how I'll build a song up. It's always different, but this was the original bass. So that's, I guess that's what I was working with originally. Let me see if I have, let me mute the effects chain. So a lot of my bass processing happens in the effects over here, where I can layer up different like EQ. I got a little distortion, and that looks like it up for here, and then more EQ, like really harsh EQ, and then a little more distortion and a tube distortion here. That's where I really start getting the effects on the basses going, is in the mixers. I really don't mess with, I guess I do have a little clipper on here, and some bright noise. It's pretty basic. Like when I make bass lines and mid bass sounds, it's usually simple waves. This is a square wave, and yeah, this is what the dry bass would sound like with that drum loop had I gone with this. So it's, you know, it's got potential, but and with that effects chain on, it sounds like this. It's just super subby. I mean, there must be an automation that I'm missing or something like that. But anyway, it's Not what I ended up going with. I ended up making a new pattern. So this main bass is the one that goes like this. That's the first bass. And if you listen to it dry, it sounds like this. It's pretty basic. It's a square wave, again, put into a scream filter for just some extra resonances, and I kind of just found where I thought it sounded good. And I actually ended up automating the cutoff, I believe, of this scream filter. So when I automated the cutoff is where the real sound came. And then in the effects chain, there's literally nothing on it. It's just, I just resampled it through Edison, and it sounds like this. A lot of my sounds are like that. They're just super basic. Just need the right amount of like distortion and just the right, just really precise filtering is will go a really long way. And then the second bass sound is this one. And I muted the automations. I think the automation would, yeah, so something like that. This isn't exact. Anyway, let's look at the actual bass setup for that one though, because that one's a little more intricate. A square wave again. I use a lot of square waves. It's either going to be square or saw. Usually I just stick to the really basic waveforms and kind of mold it from there. But this is a scream filter again, just because I guess in the time period that I made this, I was experimenting with the, you can get cool harmonics out of a scream filter that you can't really get out of just a low pass. And I don't know why exactly that is sound-wise. Like it might be kind of a comb filter type of like extreme peak or something, but you get some really cool resonances out of the scream filter. I'll pretty much only use scream or daft on massive. For those of you that don't mess with like oscillation or LFOs, I mean, it's basically a way of just repeating the same automation over and over again without having to do anything. So with this one, I put that dive down on the filter to make it open and close like this. So it'll just open all the way, and it's really harsh when it happens. It attacks and then it just dives down. Whereas you can hear if I did this wave right here, which starts down here, then goes up to the top, then comes back down, and it's already at the bottom when it starts at the bottom again, so it's very smooth. It just like keeps. This is what it would have sounded like that way. But since I had the really harsh cut right here, it sounds like this. So this is also kind of the same type of sound I used for Diagon Alley for the clanky noises. A lot of people thought those were percussion, but they were actually a bass line created in Massive here with this dive down. And on the effects chain, this is doing a little more than the last sound. This is without the effects chain. I should have showed it to you before the effects chain originally, but yeah, it's a really basic sound. What I have going on here is an initial reverb, which added this to it. It's super subtle. I can't even hear it because my speakers are turned down low. So yeah, it's a really subtle reverb, and then into this EQ, which I do a lot of really harsh EQing on my mid basses and sublines. So it looks like I scooped out a ton of the lows and got the mids going pretty good, and then scooped some of these higher mids, and that's about it really. And I probably did that to feed into the distortion that I went into, which was a tube mech distortion on Camel Fat. That's my main distortion plugin I like to use. And whatever you feed into the distortion, whatever comes before it in the chain, like really affects the way it sounds when it distorts. So this is what it sounds like without the EQ before it. And this is what it sounds like after the EQ is added before the distortion. What you feed into the distortion really affects what you get out. So after you distort, then you have your main like starting point, like where it sounds what you want it to be, and then whatever you EQ after the distortion is just purely cleaning up the sound that you've created. Here's the old one without the EQ, the post EQ, and here's the with the post EQ. So I shelved off a lot of those high mids, kept the mids really prominent here, and just had some frequency I wanted to duck out right here. But yeah, it was just trial and error, and that's what came to be the final sound. That created this audio clip, which dry sounds like this. So that was the dry audio clip I bounced out. And then I have a whole nother effects chain here. Well, first I added a compressor, really high ratio, just really smashing it. And apparently the sound was really loud because I left the threshold at 0 dB. So anything that went above 0 just got completely smashed. And then after that, I ended up putting back apparently a bunch of those highs after the compression, because maybe it just compressed them down and I was able to... It's all trial and error. That's like a lot of my sound designs, is just keeping a save point and just going from there, and then keeping a save point and going from there, and just molding it like a piece of clay, you know. And apparently I put a flanger. I use classic flanger. A lot of classic plugins, they're free and they're pretty good. So classic flanger. So use a trick where you do a really fast delay. Like it's not even a delay at this point. It's like just a metallic ringing, and just tuned it to the sound, to the pitch that I thought was good for the song, and then automated the dry wet. So here's the dry wet automation. So it's totally dry when the sound comes in, and as the sound goes, the delay trick kind of comes in. By the end of the noise, it's pretty much 61% in. So here's what it sounds like with just totally wet the whole time. I just wanted this part to have it. I actually never ended up bouncing it again to a new audio clip, so it still has these automations and stuff, but that's basically what it came out to be, was this right here. This sound right here, this is the bass noise, and it came from this massive. I used carbon. This is just kind of a random noise, to be honest. It's just has a LFO shape, this wave right here on the Daft filter that's going over this noise, and it also has it on the wavetable. But other than that, there's nothing going on this massive. It's literally just a carbon moving around right here, and then a Daft opening and closing, both on this same... I don't remember the process of some of these sounds, but it looks like I bounced it again into this clip. Let me see. I can just hear it. At some point I filtered it down with a low pass and just got those lows coming out, and just cleaned it up with some EQ afterward here, where I boosted a lot of mid. But yeah, those are the main bass sounds. So all together with those three. Oh, so another trick in a lot of my songs I like to do is just put in some vinyl like crackle noise, just to make it more interesting on the high end, really, and just have more of an organic sound to it. So on this, I used a volume automation on the vinyl sample. So here's the vinyl sample, and I just volume automated it to kind of sidechain on each kick drum, maybe on the snare too. Usually we'll take some kind of atmospheric kind of just Foley noise and kind of duck it around the main drum hits, the main kick snare hits, and it just seems to add like a lot of interesting textures on the drums. and just this song in general, without like just sounding like you plop something on top of the song. If you just lay vinyl on top of a song, it's just going to sound like a degraded quality song or something. But I find that if you duck it around the kick and snare, it sounds like it's meant to be there, and it sounds like it's part of the track. So anyway, that's this layer. These are actually a pretty big part of the song, and they're just a atmosphere pack that I downloaded at some point. It looks like I'm just using the sample how it came. Oh, actually, okay. So yeah, this is another thing about that vinyl trick and about the atmosphere tricks is you never really want any, unless it's for a real reason. Like you never want any resonant lows. So I basically just high passed this atmosphere noise like really hardcore, and probably the same. Actually, I didn't do it to the vinyl, but I usually do. This is, like I said, an old song and a simple song, and I probably just neglected to do that. And anyway, these atmospheres are just basically high-passed samples I found, and they're really good samples. Just seem to fit the kind of creepy siren atmosphere. I ducked these around the kick and snare as well. So same principle as like with the vinyl crackle. The more you can kind of make it seem like it's interacting with the song, the more it's going to sound natural and like it's meant to be in the song. So when it interacts with the kick in a side chainy kind of way, it just sounds better. So this is what the actual atmosphere sounds like when I automated it. So with the song, and it's very subtle. All this stuff is really subtle mixed down stuff, but I think in the end it actually ends up making a difference. So other than that, it looks like I got some percussion layers. So a lot of times I'll take claps and layer them on top of existing snares. So like I got this clap and then this clap. So this one's definitely spread to the sides. Yep, I got a stereo enhancer spreading it out to the left and right. And then also with the claps, since they're more of a high end, just layering the sound, thickening out the snare. They don't need to have any lows or anything unless it's like an accent clap where you're really trying to specifically target like something that's missing from the base layer snare, like the main snare. So this one is just kind of emphasizing a little bit of the high mids and highs and spread to the side. So it's just giving it that kind of crunch, just kind of filling out the sides, thickening the sound. This one is more just a white noise transient. It looks like I spread that a tiny bit too, but also this one almost the same EQ. It's just low pass or high passed. And just emphasizing the kind of white noisy, very high end, kind of a organic kind of smack going on there. So that ended up layering bass drum layer. With that now, you can hear how it fills out the snare a little bit. But it looks like the only other layers going on is the hi-hat layers. So I got some random packs that I'll click around on and find just good hi-hat elements to throw into. So here's some hi-hats, and I just grabbed those from Vengeance or whatever, and thought they fit the tune. So there's a little incidental hat there where I shaped the volume out at the beginning. So this is the original sound, and I made it kind of more of I ducked it around the snare because a lot of layers that aren't the main like bass layer drums, like the bass layer snare, I'll layer things around it volume wise too, where like it doesn't hit on the exact hit of the snare, but it ducks right around it. It's accompanying the snare, but it's not like fighting with it for the space. This shit right here is the main hit, and you don't want to like dirty that up, but you do want to layer it and have it be bigger. So if you volume duck it right here, it's still there. It's still right there with it. It's just not taking that initial hit that happens right here and muddying it up and making it less prominent here. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I do that like all the time with the drums, with the kicks, with the snares, with any like percussive, like anything that's a real transient hit. I like to just leave that alone and just let that be the main transient, and everything around it kind of volume ducks. That's where it has to be really precise with the volume editing, but if you can volume edit it right around the actual hit, it can still layer it up and sound like it's right on top of it and making and triggering at the same time, but it's actually not, and it's making for a cleaner mix. So those are the hi-hats I added. So the other thing I added was a couple of delayed percussions, and at the halfway point of the drop I did introduce a new hat. At the halfway point I introduced this tambourine sound. So when it comes into the second half, you can hear it. And there's a little drum break fill right here that's just a time stretched and EQ'd probably. Yeah, just a low cut, high mid kind of boost here. A little bit of reverb, short reverb, small room, and it just sounds like this. So I just ended up taking that and repeating the I like re-triggered it. Here's the dry break, and here's with the EQ and reverb, and here's the edited break fill into the second half. So it's that simple, but when it's thrown in with the mix, and then I introduced that tambourine right there. So here's my little delayed percussions here. So I have this one firing eighth notes, and then this one, and it's really subtle stuff, but I guess I just at the time felt like it made the difference. So here's where it triggers. So it's really subtle, really simple. It only happens every 8 bars or whatever. But you can hear it in there. Especially on that downbeat, you can hear that one lingering over. Right there. And I hear this vocal in there too. I think this is just a really good sample. I love those kind of like shouty, just kind of like distorted, just I don't know how to describe it. I like all those kind of like vocal little blips, and this is just a good one I found in a pack of some kind. But yeah, that's the dry, and it looks like I added an EQ that was really spiking the mids here. Low cut spiked the mids, and it ended up like this. So here's the OG. Here's this one. So it's just the harsh. It's really gonna cut through the mix harder because it's just that harsh mids there. And then this delay bank, I like to use this because it has a built-in filter. So rather than just repeating the sound the same exact way over and over again, each delay will get a little more high passed to what you set it, or low passed, or whatever you want the filter to be. So it sounds like this now. And it's just kind of fading away, like the filter's kind of just dragging it up too. And then I put a reverb on it, and the ending sound sounded like this. It's a really subtle reverb, but that's another thing with deep music and deep songs, is like it needs to have a little bit of everything. So it needs to have dry elements, it needs to have super drowned in reverb elements, it needs to have mono elements, it needs to have stereo elements. You know, it needs to have like really subtle, quiet elements. It needs to have really loud, prominent elements. Like, it just has to have a little bit of everything. Every song ever, really. I mean, no matter what genre. So that looks like that's the main guts of the tune. There's some incidentals I'm seeing here, like this. I don't even know what these are. Okay, so those are just sound effects that I'm layering up there. So that sounds like the end of the first phrase. Yeah, so that's that part. Oh, and here's another little vocal blip. So I guess the original sound is this. I just grabbed this. So I did want to show you another part. This there's a delay on something that kept taking it higher and higher and peaking it higher and higher. So if you let that keep going, it'll eventually like blow your speakers out. Like it'll just get so loud, and the feedback is feeding into itself and just doubling up and getting louder and louder, and it'll never end. So like I'll have to make it into an audio clip like I did here, and then at that point, see how it just keeps getting louder and louder and louder? At that point, when you make it an audio clip, you can just cut it off and stop it from getting any louder. So what I did then on the very last one is put a normal delay on it, where it just kind of it's building, and then right here it goes down, and it just does a regular delay away. So I wanted to point that out as a trick I did there, and I also did it here, it looks like. So it's just a percussion sound. This is the original sample, and then it just does that delay trick where it just keeps feeding on itself and high passing, but it's getting really peaked, and it just keeps feeding on that peak. And same story, I made it into an audio clip so that I could cut it right here and delay it normally. So there's the normal delay. This is where it cuts right here. That's where I officially chopped it and then made it normal, just delay away. So yeah, I wanted to point that one out. There's one more drum loop here that I used for the intro. So I time stretched it because it looks like it even says in the title it's 128 BPM. So this is the original sample here. It sounds like this. I put this EQ on it. I basically just cut all the low mids and lows out of it, just super high passed, and then stretched it out and cut the pitch down to -12 down in pitch, and it sounds like this. Forgot to put the EQ on there. This is with the high passed EQ. And there's one more thing here I'm just noticing. In the intro, I grabbed a upright bass sample from somewhere. I have no idea where I grabbed it. But I pitched it down, and let me just see here. The original was like this. I put this EQ on it. Looks like it's not doing much, just kind of boosting the mids and high mids a little bit, and then over here it looks like I pitched it down and just kind of chopped it, so it sounds like this. Just from cutting the sample, anything that has bass in it and you just chop the sample, it can click like that. It has these little clicks in it. And you can get rid of it by a few different EQ tricks and volume tricks, but I didn't do that apparently because, like I said, this is an old tune and there's just more sound effects for the intro. But yeah, all together, sounds like this. You can really hear how important these atmospheres are right here. If I mute these atmosphere samples and the vinyl crack, it's really bare, and it's one of those songs that really needs a big atmospheric presence, because otherwise this is the drop if I took away the atmospheres in Vinyl Crackle. And then here it is with the atmospheres of Vinyl Crackle. So they're subtle, but they're very important to the track, and every track's different. It's not to say that every single track needs, you know, massive, you know, atmospheric presence, but this one for sure did. If you don't know where to start with tunes or what to do to layer them up, it's every tune's different, and you know, I hope you could see some of the how basic really these projects are. There's not a lot to them. It's just that's the same. That's with minimal music and deep music or minimal music or whatever. It's just it doesn't have to be a lot of things. It just has to be kind of the right things. So I hope, if nothing else, that you guys took that away from it, is that like everything has to just fit and just be cohesive with each other. Like I said, I'll probably eventually get on here more and do the other 5 that were tied. I'll make a post or something about it next time I do another one of these, and thanks for tuning in, guys.